So he's talking about, I got cut off, but I was trying to work it in there in time, but where human beings are able to dissolve things into concepts by ignoring detail. Now, for something, I'm going to rewind a little bit to smooth over where I got cut off. For something is possible in the realm of these schemata that humans create, which could never be achieved with the vivid first impressions. The construction of a pyramidal order according to castes and degrees, the creation of a new world of laws, privileges, subordinations, and clearly marked boundaries, a new world, one which now confronts that other vivid world of first impressions as more solid, more universal, better known, and more human than the immediately perceived world, and thus as the regulative and imperative world. So we create this ability to take away the nature of our impressions as they come to us, basically as animals, and in this forebrain or the whole brain where we're turning things over, we're able to create a world, for example, where one man is born a king and another man is born his servant. Okay. Whereas each perceptual metaphor is individual and without equals and is therefore able to elude all classification, the great edifice of concepts displays the rigid regularity of a Roman columbarium and exhales in logic that strength and coolness which is characteristic of mathematics. Anyone who has felt this cool breath of logic will hardly believe that even the concept, which is as bony, foursquare, and transposable as a die, is nevertheless merely the residue of a metaphor. Everything being, he had this right, that we have metaphors and we're drawing them from the perceptions. The modern way of putting this is saying that all the metaphors come down to sense and motor things, things that have to do directly with your action interaction, as bioevolutionary creatures embedded in this environment. And that the illusion which is involved in the artistic transference of a nerve stimulus into images is, if not the mother, then the grandmother of every single concept. But in this conceptual crap game, probably not a normal translation, but anyway, truth means using every die in the designated manner, counting its spots accurately, fashioning the right categories, and never violating the order of the caste and class rank. Just as the Romans and Etruscans cut up the heavens with rigid mathematical lines and confined a god within each of the spaces thereby delimited, as within a templum, so every people has a similarly mathematically divided conceptual heaven above themselves, and henceforth thinks that truth demands that each conceptual god be sought only within his own sphere. It's interesting how much of this relates to this, what Irelan is arguing with me. Here one may certainly admire man as a mighty genius of construction, who succeeds in piling an infinitely complicated dome of concepts upon an unstable foundation, and, as it were, on running water. Of course, in order to be supported by such a foundation, his construction must be like one constructed of spiders' webs, delicate enough to be carried along by the waves, strong enough not to be blown apart by every wind. As a genius of construction, man raises himself far above the bee in the following way. So here we have, this is not aggrandizement, but acknowledgement. But ironic. Okay. Whereas the bee builds with wax that he gathers from nature, this is an interesting scientific error, I think. Man builds with the far more delicate conceptual material which he first has to manufacture from himself. In this he is greedy to be admired, he is greatly to be admired, but not on account of his drive for truth or for pure knowledge of things, which again is what most aggrandizements of the intellectual sort rather than theistic sort rely on. When someone hides, the theistic aggrandizement usually is his heart and his goodness, his potential for goodness. Anyway, in the West. When someone hides something behind a bush and looks for it again in the same place and finds it there as well, there's not much to praise in such seeking and finding. Okay, so that's the thing. We are special because we see the forms. And Nietzsche points out, no, we put the forms in there and then, oh look, it's right there. So yet this is how matters stand regarding seeking and finding truth within the realm of reason. If I make up the definition of a mammal and then, after inspecting a camel, declare, look, a mammal, I have indeed brought a truth to light in this way, but it is a truth of limited value. That is to say, it is a thoroughly anthropomorphic truth which contains not a single point which would be true in itself, or really and universally valid apart from man. At bottom, what the investigator of such truths is seeking is only the metamorphosis of the world into man. And that's not a bad thing, as you can see the subtext here. That in itself is not a bad thing. It is really the aggrandizement of this process that is the worst problem, though there are dangers, according to Nietzsche, involved. Even if you don't aggrandize, just naturally. He strives to understand the world as something analogous to man, and at best he achieves by his struggles the feeling of assimilation, similar to the way in which astrologers considered the stars to be in man's service and connected with his happiness and sorrow. Such an investigator considers the entire universe in connection with man. The entire universe as the infinitely fractured echo of one original sound man. The entire universe is the infinitely multiplied copy of one original picture man. His method is to treat man as the measure of all things. But in doing so, he again proceeds from the error of believing that he has these things, which he intends to measure, immediately before him as mere objects. He forgets that the original perceptual metaphors are metaphors and takes them to be things themselves. And again, does anybody notice how I have gone on and on? You know, one of these replies, and I think it was Professor Antonson, or no, maybe it was this Irelon relativism video, is about how I don't watch Piro because he just goes on and on, doesn't say anything. Again, you just can't get it. That's fine with me, but no, this is something, for example, that I've been saying. You know, that we have to go back to the perceptual information that we get. And yes, it is metaphorical, and that's a good way to study the, you know, the logic involved, the broad logic of the human thinking, okay, through metaphor. I'm going to make another video because this block is going to be more than 2 minutes.